Cool. Well, welcome back to our short series here called Customer Experience in the Public Sector. And today we have one of the foremost experts in customer experience and many other experiences, Amira Boland, who served as a senior official at the Office of Management and Budget, which is a very powerful organization in the federal government, but now has an incredible role at what she'll talk about more. That actually helps states in delivering critical services and programs and benefits. So, Amira, thank you so much for taking the time to be on, and welcome to our series that we're doing here.
Great, awesome.
So, I kind of always start with the few guests that we've had already to kind of walk through their career and how they got here to be a C expert, so to speak. So. Besides being, obviously, we can wrap up with talking about your role at OMB, but would love to start a little bit earlier. And what I didn't know about you before we talked previous to this was that you started your career in counterterrorism. So walk us through the journey of Amira and how you got here.
It was it's easy to look back now and like draw a line, but it definitely was not pre-planned or premeditated in any way. 9/11 was obviously a culminating event for a lot of folks in our generation, and I think that I was really interested in digging into like what is the source of the root of this problem here, and got really interested in how does someone who is a child grow up to be a 9/11 hijacker. And so was interviewing folks that had lived in the areas where the 9/11 hijackers lived. And it was really interesting to hear stories of childcare. And, there was a mosque in one area in the UAE in Georgetown that offered after-school programming and Sunday school programming, and really just started to understand, like, the deep appreciation, I think, for behavioral science and psychology and developmental psychology of children that had sort of like groomed these people into who they became. And in one family that I spoke with, they had recognized that their son was like acting differently and things were a little off, and pulled their son from the program. Other families just for whatever reason didn't. And so anyway, so that was sort of this, put me on this track of like, ooh, this behavioral science thing is really interesting. And I started to pull the thread of how does an organization like Hezbollah or Hamas have support in their community? And a lot of it came into like a service provider role, and someone who got the vaccines to the kids and did the Boy Scouts and did the schools and did the healthcare, and was reliable. And so that was, really a different tack than I think a lot of our sort of
counterterrorism. Civil society, right?
Yeah,
exactly. It's like who was there when you needed it most? Like where the rubber met the road.
Who was in your community doing things for you that you could see? So that was interesting, and then obviously it was quite depressing. And so started to go into just private sector and did some product design in financial services, which was really interesting. Again, that behavioral science of how people spend, how they take risk, how they save or don't save. And then we had the opportunity in the Obama administration to create the White House Social and Behavioral Sciences team. The UK had done a really interesting behavioral insights team model. It was kind of taking off globally in different countries. And I think it was like, based on how we understand people to access, process, and act on information, how do we better design public services? And so that's what I came into federal service on, and I thought it would be a couple of months and we get the team up and running, and then stayed for nearly a decade because I realized how great the opportunity was.
I have so many questions, but probably need to stay on track with the CX. But I love that that's kind of the foundational background for how you eventually arrived at OMB. So let's talk about your time at OMB and some of the things that you did and you're most proud of, some of maybe the lessons you may have learned, some of the mistakes that we inevitably make. Obviously, we interacted most during the life experience work that you launched and managed, but tell me, like, what were some of the highlights? What were some of the lessons learned about that journey? and then we'll kind of talk a little bit more about moving forward in CX.
Yeah, well, and I think one thing for people who are public servants at any perch is really understanding the different levers available to you. And you mentioned that OMB was powerful. I think it has a go-to power that it uses, which is the budget. And I think if anyone listening has been in the federal government, you know, there's things like, oh, OMB is where good ideas go to die, or they're the no police, or, you know, the fun killers. And I think that's sort of the brand and the single lever that a lot of people at OMB lean into. And I think when I got there, I realized there is a lot more here. This is a center of government, and at a center of government, you can do many things. You can convene, you can issue guidance, you can maybe direct resources, yes. You can provide an enabling environment. You can see things that are working across the full landscape and bring them to other people that may benefit from those lessons. And so I think when I first got there, I started to really understand like what a perch it was and how it could be used as a force for good and not just a force for no. And so started to think about, you know, we joked about giving guidance with a hug. Like, how could we challenge and use the position that we had to like get agencies to prioritize actually thinking about public facing services, and then also provide the supports that could help. And I think one thing that was really great was meeting so many people that came into service for the right reasons and still had that connection to mission inside of them, and then within the institution had just had that like beaten out of them. And so like providing this space, you know, I had one civil servant who went on a trip with us for one of the life experience projects say like, oh, this is why I joined government, and I was gonna leave, and then this project came and I got to be a part of it. And that is like renewing me.
That's cool.
You know, working at my agency. And I was like, that's the ball game. Like, that's the reason we do this, is just like providing this enabling an environment for people to think and work different in a way that why they came to serve. And I think customer experience became this great umbrella because at the end of the Obama administration, we had all these, like, you know, it was 1,000 seeds flowering or whatever the expression was. You know, you had the United States Digital Service, you had the Presidential Innovation Fellows, you had 18F, you had the lab at OPM, you had the Office of Evaluation Sciences where I had come from. And everyone kind of had their own silo of like their innovative thing they were doing. And I think customer experience provides this very neutral territory where we can all see ourselves in it and be like, oh, I could bring a skill to that mission. And so we could start to build these like interdisciplinary, interagency teams. And I think that's like really what we need to be able to solve the problems that we're trying to tackle.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, well, that was my experience, at least, you know, having been, you know, one of the federal life experience leads for the cluster, the life experience that we were managing, navigating the sometimes difficult transition from military to civilian life. Yeah. And we used the authority of OMB and your team to really bring the military service branches together, Enterprise, Department of Defense at the time, Department of Labor, and that cross-agency cohort. Like, we really drove change, and I think that some of that has changed, you know, hasn't permeated as deep as we wanted it to at present day. But at the time, like the first workshop that we did right around the corner from VA Central Office, you see like career defense officials who are managing the transition assistance program, so like senior GS and senior and SES, coming in and doing a human-centered design workshop with VA customer experience strategists who had been there, done that. And they're like lighting up around the projects that we could do, and then voting on the ones that we think may actually get something done. And I think it drove tangible impact for the time that we were there.
I think even just to your point on the like, maybe it hasn't stayed as much as we wanted it to. I think the thing that doesn't go backwards is like actually that individual level exposure to this way of thinking, and that doesn't go away. Right. And I remember we had in the very, very first veterans, the kind of transitioning from active duty service to civilian life project that we looked, it was really focused on employment. And we brought in a bunch of OMB budget examiners in to just see the map. Like, we rolled it out on a big table in a conference room. And I remember one of them saying, I don't know how to relate to this information. And we were like, what? Like, they just couldn't even understand how to relate from their 30,000 foot level to a journey map that had been placed in front of them. And I just said, like, point blank, my reaction was like, as a human, like, your whole job right now in this moment is just to understand this as a human.
Put yourself in their shoes.
As a human to a human. And that will open your mind. And then after that, that person became one of the most like engaged examiners we ever worked with. And so I think it's just that like even if the like whole bureaucracy does not change, which I know hopefully one day we will do, I think that is like such a value add of this whole effort.
Well, I think this is where OMB and the power of the budget, then the no police, the fun police, whatever, but can be used for good, to your point, is the convener, but also using that authority to go to those naysayers within the agency saying like, we can't do this.
Right.
I remember the first objection that we got from the Department of Defense is that, well, this requires IRB level approval, right? And we're like, no, it doesn't actually. Human-centered design, by code X, Y, or Z, like qualifies as process improvement.
Administrative experiment exception.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you all helped us bring them to the table. And even though their first meeting was very much like this, their second, third workshop, they were fully engaged, and I think still are for the ones that are still in those roles. And so I mean, I can attribute great success because of the role that you and your team played, but would love to hear, I know that you're still doing some of that work in your current role.
Yeah.
And can you walk us quick, because I know like there are life experience work, I think this transcends administrations and parties and presidents, right? So the Obama administration, the first Trump administration, and the Biden administration all had really important life experience projects, some of which continued from the Trump administration to the Biden administration, which was ours, which I thought was amazing. Tell us a little bit about those projects and what you're most proud of, and then how that may continue on in your current life.
Yeah, I mean, it was really neat. One of my favorite moments was when we ran a White House principals process, which is where like the heads of each of the components of the White House to select the life experiences. And it actually, we purposefully built a process that went all the way into that, from like all of the deputy secretaries, that's the number twos or the number ones in the case of some agencies, meet monthly. And we had them, like we said, today you're not the representative of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce. You're here as a federal leader, and you're going to help pick what are the 5 moments in people's lives that we're going to make better. And that, just seeing that discussion and seeing different, one deputy secretary who was not at all like directly involved in this experience was really pounding the table for the moment of turning 18. Wow. He was like, you register for the draft, you maybe file your taxes for the first time, you're going off to post-secondary of some time or starting a job, full time for the first time. Like, that is a moment where someone becomes a citizen, and how do we make that better? And how do we put people on the track of active citizenship? And I was like, this is so cool to see. So, like, if he had come in representing the interests of his agency, like, he wouldn't have gotten there. And so I think even just transforming the leader's mindset to think like, how can you marshal the resources of the federal government to improve people's lives was really cool to see. And then, so I was really proud to see like we were actually kind of changing the way people were thinking and acting and making decisions. And I would love to see that scaled one day. But I'm really proud of the way that we built these teams, that we actually kind of, again, people sort of put down their like alliance or their, allegiances to their home institution, whether it was a particular agency or USDS or 18F or wherever they came from. And we're like, I'm on the birth of a child team. I'm on the like approaching retirement team. And I just feel like we could get more of that. And I'm really proud of the way a lot of the projects did launch. And we saw the newborn supply kit was actually funded, championed by a Republican Congresswoman from Louisiana, Julia Letlow, who really like picked it up and ran with it. And that was because of the way we were like continuing to share information, continuing to share like, here's how we're learning whether or not this is working. Here's how we're making adaptations. We did it all out in the open. We had both quantitative and qualitative customer data about it. And so it was like obvious, right? It was grounded in what people said they wanted. We were responding, we adapted, we learned, we made it better. And then it could scale. And you're like, oh, these are all the things that we try and do in a project. So I think there's a lot of like lessons learned there that I'm hoping will continue to be built upon.
So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing now and how that may incorporate some of the incredible work that you've done in the past, but really kind of going down and in at the state level too.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that part of the reason of me leaving the federal government was I was like, this is super exciting and great, and also I would love to be a layer closer to delivery. And so many times in the federal government, particularly in the health and human services space, you're like, oh, and we'll pass the money off to the states and hope it goes well. And so it's been really great to now our team provides these sort of interdisciplinary teams where we have engineering, product design, data science, policy together on a team working with the state, and our focus on programs that serve families with kids under 6.
And you're at the Center for New America, right?
I'm at the New Practice Lab at New America.
New Practice Lab at New
Yeah,
America.
I know, lots of news. We're doing all kinds of new things. And it's great because we're seeing states that are really focused on like how can states are like, obviously governors have to deliver, like they're accountable to their people. Yeah. Mayors even more so, and cities are a fun place that we're starting to work too. But like so much of these federal guidance, I know we've talked about, like, the Food Nutrition Service will issue guidance on SNAP and the National School Lunch Program, and WIC, and then CMS will issue guidance on Medicaid, and Department of Labor will issue guidance on UI, and then it actually comes and falls in the lap of the same office in a state level that's trying to manage these 8 programs and actually deliver for their people. And so it's hard for them to understand, like, does this guidance conflict with this guidance? And so we're really trying to work in that kind of space and think about how can we better integrate and serve families at key moments in their lives.
Right. Well, gosh, we were talking about earlier, like, the federal government not necessarily being aligned around one individual, because there's so many different federal agencies that will funnel into the state agencies that then deliver it to one person, right? But they still have to, the individual has to understand where all these different streams come from, and that's really challenging from a user experience perspective.
That was one of the most interesting takeaways, I thought, from the very first life experience project we did on the veteran seeking employment, was that, I think one of the most powerful pieces of that map was we stacked up blocks. And again, we were doing this in the first Trump administration. We were thinking from an efficiency standpoint, why don't we map to the moments in people's lives the different federal programs that serve them in that moment? And you could see where there were certain moments where, like, 5 agencies were involved, and they each had programs around, like, job training or something, right? Or a loan for a small business. It's like there's like actually 4 different ways you could do that through the Small Business Administration or through the U.S. Department of Agriculture or through VA or whatever. And we were like, it was actually quite cleanly mapped to the most confusing parts of the process for people, right? Because it was like there was so much noise, it was hard to navigate that. It's overwhelming, exactly. And you just don't know who to go to. And so I think that's like a good place where it's like, by understanding the customer's experience, you start to see where it's like confusing, and oftentimes that's because, like, we actually have a lot happening that maybe could be improved and streamlined.
Well, this is customer experience in general, and obviously we may be biased, but it's such an important field in, like, public administration, and so that's why I didn't really call this public administration, because that sounds really boring, but public sector, because it is like federal, state, local, and where the rubber meets the road, and how we can better design not only the way that services are delivered, but the way that we organize government, and how. But there's so many entrenched, egos in this process, as we discussed earlier too. I think that it's important to consider that from a perspective, if you do want to inculcate change, you have to really manage around that too, or manage through that, or manage alongside that in some way. So
it's hard because people are attached to their pie. And so I think that's where we found that the voice of the customer is hard to argue with. And so, and I think the more that we could, like, bring people back to that of, like, yes, I know this program's been here for 30 years and it's been your life's work, and that's really important, and we want to value that, and how do we take the best of that and make sure it's actually getting to the people that it's meant to serve. Oh, by the way, it's also, like, part of these 5 other programs that are also trying to get to people. So I think it is hard. And I mean, it rolls up, happy 250th America, our bureaucracy has developed over 250 years, and that has flowed from congressional appropriations committees onto federal agencies, into different bureaus, into different levels, into different IT shops. And, like, all of those micro decisions have now impacted how people interact with services. And so it's worthy of a rethink or a step back of thinking about, like, how best do we organize all of this and these resources to serve people.
Well, that's definitely what I want to come to next, and, like, what the future of all this looks like. But one thing that stuck with me when we were speaking about this earlier was really, like, audience segmentation and customer segmentation. And that, from my perspective now at Granicus, like we talk about this all the time, and like helping agencies better align their customers and make sure that they're communicating effectively, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about that and like some of the barriers to service delivery around agencies not understanding how to do that?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because when I did projects with banks, right, that were competing, like people, it's hard for people to switch their bank, right? Like you got to fight hard to get someone to change their bank. And you are just constantly learning about who your customer is and doing everything from like really interesting social tapestry data, looking at people in certain zip codes and what radio stations do they listen to and what subscriptions do they have and what's the typical household makeup and just like such a sophistication of who your customer is and what messages will resonate with them and what they hope for themselves and what their identity is and all of that, right? And in government, we just like don't do that. we sort of, and people think like, oh, that is a design choice to not
There's
even
only
think
one
about
bank,
it.
too.
Right, exactly. There's one bank, and so we don't have to. But I remember even thinking, like, this was one of our very first projects we did in the White House Social and Behavioral Sciences team, where we were trying to increase veteran uptake of a particular benefit. And even just that's like understanding that a veteran has a deep connection to their service and doesn't want, I'm not a veteran, you can check me on this, but like doesn't want a handout, doesn't want like, you know, and so we had changed this messaging from like you qualify for this benefit to you've earned this benefit through your service.
Yes.
And that had a bump. And it was like, because that's the identity of a vet. Oh, I've earned this.
And
like,
you're not taking it away from anyone else,
Exactly.
like, which is our biggest barrier typically.
Yeah.
In that, sorry. keep
Yeah,
going.
no, but it's just like that little understanding, taking that moment to understand who the customer is and what matters to them can actually improve the service delivery. And I remember also you all have done incredible work to understand like who your different growing markets were, right? And thinking like, oh, actually one of our fastest growing populations is female veterans, and they walk into a VA health clinic and don't see themselves represented there. And so even just physical infrastructure improvements of a women's health clinic space like makes a difference. And so I think it's that understanding who your customer is can help increase access across all populations in different ways that often require different messaging, different visual cues, everything.
Well, to your point about qualitative and quantitative data, a lot of agencies only really respond to quantitative data historically. I think that's changed over time because of a lot of the efforts that you have been a part of or led. But you can only really get those insights from qualitative data, from doing in-depth interviews and design workshops and just really understanding the customer. But then you use quantitative data to measure the success over time, and we have seen an increase. Back to your point about the creation of the VA women's clinics and separate entrance, like really nice services that are specific to women's veterans' needs. Mm-hmm. We have seen trust, ease, effectiveness, and emotion, those CX measures, of course, that we're famous for, increase over time. Now, there's still a ton of work to do because women inevitably and unfortunately still trust VA less than their male counterparts do, but I think that they've come a long way, but still have a long way to go.
Well, and you're making gains because you recognize that, right?
Yes.
And sometimes even just knowing what the problem is is a first step. And I think it's like, as you were talking about, it's this mixture. I teach college freshman and sophomore about measurement, and we talk about like you need to have a mix of things. Like you need to have quantitative data that is like your rich administrative data that agencies already have and collect as a matter of course. And then you add to it this qualitative piece and you go back and forth, right? It's not like they're not in, it's not like people are like, oh, is quantitative better than qualitative or qualitative? No, like it's all data and you need as big a great picture as you can get. And that's a lot of the work we're doing now, actually, is we started out with this multi-state cohort listening to families about their life, just holistically, because so many times in civic tech we go in on the like, tell me how bad your SNAP experience was, or this form, and we were asking people more like holistic questions about their lives. What's your morning routine like? When do you feel like you're the best parent you can possibly be? Like, what does your ideal weekends look like? And like from that started to understand these different themes, like from qualitative work. And then we were like, this is really interesting. We'd like to look at this at a national level. And so we ran a nationwide parent survey that was representative across all demographics. and really started to understand, like, oh, this is true. These things are true for parents in America, and what they hope and want. And so it's like, and then we're going to go back and kind of work on, like, what does that mean for policy? And we'll do qualitative work on that too. So you can bounce back and forth and get really good, stronger ideas.
Solution design using the baseline data, which is, if it's obviously statistically significant, no one can. Well, the voice of the customer always is always true, right? Or never lies. I used to say that too. Right? Okay, so thinking like what's the future of the life experience work, and with all of the technology changes that have happened, particularly with artificial intelligence and the many positives and potentially negatives that could come along with that, what do you kind of what do you envision for this, how this work may continue in the future or may not?
We always said this is long haul work. Like, we are moving the aircraft carrier, like 6 aircraft carriers, like, this is huge work to change the way, and as I mentioned before, there are just like so many layers to this, and that doesn't happen overnight, I don't think. But I think that there are like pieces of this where it's very clear and could be like a model for others. I think the vets transition is one where it's just like, we've struggled with this for decades, and like, we have an answer. Like, we know what the pain points are. We know what the pain points are. We know what could fix it. Like, let's do it. And I think, there's different parts of that that you're closer to than I am, of just like where we think there's room for improvement. But I think there's also like core populations that we can look at that many people are excited about and can get behind. I think when a child is born, that is a moment in which we could serve people better, and where we could start to like piece together services. I think the UK kind of at the opposite end of that, when someone dies, right? The UK did a really interesting thing called Tell Us Once, and that you basically can, the government in their situation knows that someone has died because it's a government healthcare system, but you can opt in to do Tell Us Once, and they will tell insurers, they will tell banks, they will tell telecom, credit cards, so that you don't have to go through and tell everyone. Veterans benefits there, and so I think the birth and death experiences could be incredible places to start. And then also, I think the approaching retirement, which is like a really key moment in Americans' lives, because you start to think about your retirement benefits that you've worked your life for, and your Medicare coverage. And so how do we make that another, like, as that deputy secretary, like that other like moment of active citizenship? Like, how can we like show people that like you've worked your whole life, and now you're getting to this part of your life, and the government is here to like recognize your contributions, and here's your benefits. So I think if we picked like 2 or 3 key moments that we just like attacked, and could get Congress on down to state and local governments to kind of use that convening power of the federal government, we could actually drive some change.
Then that might be the ultimate patient experience at scale. Is like the reference you just made between CMS and Social Security, and how IRS may play a role, but states certainly. So let's peel that back like one more layer. And what's a real like potential solution for that big problem that everyone inevitably faces? Right?
Hyper specific, but a bee in my bonnet since I learned that it was true. Once you go, so we made some strides on like connecting the actual web properties between Social Security and Medicare, right?
Because you would hard to do.
You would search Medicare, and you would get on a CMS website, and then it'd be like, apply for Medicare, boop, over to SSA, and you're like, what's going on?
Oh my gosh.
So we tried to build that connective tissue a little better.
And the user interface looks completely different from one to the other, right?
Yes, and you're just like, wait, now I'm going into the system called iClaim on SSA, and like, what is this? Why am I talking to Social Security? I want Medicare. I don't want retirement yet, Anywho, so that just like lipstick on a pig has gotten better. But you still go through a process. I learned recently that still a majority of cases that start for retirement benefits, people have to actually go into the office. We can't just actually adjudicate them online, even if you complete it online. I think that could probably get fixed with a lot of really good AI and data work. I think once you do apply or enroll in Medicare, you then have to wait for a paper card to come in the mail with your Medicare ID number to then go back to the Medicare website, even though it gets mailed to you from, SSA transmit and data batches over to Medicare, and then Medicare sends you your paper card, and then you can go to the Medicare website, and then you can select your plan. Like, you should be able to do that in one sitting.
There's got to be a better way, right? Oh my gosh.
You should be able to do that in one sitting. And then you start to think about, like, there's a really interesting opportunity now with the same leader at the top of both SSA and IRS. Like, right. That's the core data we have about you as a citizen.
And the biggest service delivery.
Yeah, they touch everybody. And so, like, how could we start to integrate those services into thinking about, like, looking at your lifetime earnings in one place, understanding your retirement benefits in one place? Like, that could very easily, well, very easily, but that could intuitively make sense to be together in some way. Yeah, and really thinking about that tax interaction as like a key moment every year of, like, could that become a benefits adjudication moment? Could that be a, oh, by the way, you're filing your taxes. Do you know that you have this much money in your Trump account? Do you know that you have these other services available to you? Like, if you're an 18-year-old suddenly filing your taxes for the first time, how do we make sure that you see, like, oh, you could apply for FAFSA. You may be eligible for a Pell Grant based on what we see.
That's the golden goose then, right? Because it touches the most Americans, in theory, right?
Yeah, the SSA IRS.
My goodness.
Yeah. And other countries do that, right? Like, the tax form is a benefits application.
Yeah.
And they can adjudicate data. They can adjudicate other benefits based on that data.
Well, let's go one step further on that. Y'all have studied previously other countries' CX. Well, they probably don't refer to it as customer experience systems, but like their government service delivery. Like, can you talk about some of the best models out there for, especially that address like this type of problem statement?
In 2018, when we first started doing this work, we were like, who is thinking about this? And it was your classic, like, Singapore and Estonia, like these countries that are like completely digitally first, newer governments that had built kind of post-government or post-internet era, know? And so I think they were starting to think about, how do we integrate, like, licensing and marriage certificates, and even a crazy example, Greece actually increased their rate of no contest divorces because they made it so easy digitally that it actually brought down the temperature, and people could sort out their divorce on their own because they were incentivized to just self-service it.
Box check divorce?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know if that's like the thing we want to go for, but
no, probably not.
but it was just interesting to see that how much of, like, oh my God, that whole administrative state around a life moment amped up the temperature.
Yeah, it's so stressful, right?
Yeah. So it was interesting to see the way other countries have really digitized services and bundled them together. The classic joke is that you can, like, walk into one place in Estonia and renew your license, your driver's license, your business license, and your passport at once, right? Like,
imagine that.
There's seeds of that, right? Like, Services Australia is sort of like that, right? Service Canada is kind of like that. They've started to, like, see a common service provider and start to move over different services into that one service delivery channel.
I think Ukraine is also trending that way too, and they created an app that everyone now has that can not only house your driver's license and other critical credentials that you need, but also warn you of incoming missiles, which is also necessary but scary.
I remember hearing their CIO once in a meeting sharing that, prior to the war, there had been all this talk of risk of moving to the cloud and risk of going off of, like, their data centers, and then suddenly the risk calculation changed, and it was like, actually it's more risky to not have it in the cloud.
Those data centers can get blown up the next day, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's, like, interesting how this, like, crisis can sometimes create the space for big leaps, and I wonder, for all of us now, it's like transformation work can't happen when everyone's comfortable, and so what does that kind of open up for us?
Whole of government change too, right? So amazing. I'd love to talk more about that too, but gosh, we only have so much time. So okay, the lightning round is probably I don't know if it's my favorite, maybe it'll be your favorite, but it's a couple quick questions that I want to ask everybody that works in this space. So the first question is, what's one CX metric that every federal agency should track?
I think it's trust. But I understand when people feel, I think it has to be sort of like in the context of the agency itself. Like trust in government, we know, is a noisy measure. So I like the way VA kind of made it trust in VA to deliver on its like commitment to the nation's veterans. I think there's a way to ask it that, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to show is that democracy can work.
Yes.
Your government can work. So.
And you might trust your government one day.
Yeah. And for the whole house of cards to work, like that has to be the base.
Well, and it takes 10 plus years to do, right? I mean, as we've seen with VA's experiment and success, for lack of a better term. So might it take longer for the whole of government? We don't know, but I guess that is something that we should aspire to. Yeah. Okay, what's one technology investment that's overrated today? Apps.
Yeah. Everyone wants an app.
I think Drew said the same thing.
Really?
Yeah.
I remember, there's so many times, being at OMB, being the no police, there's so many times that an agency's like, we want to build an app. And you're like, guys, people just go to Google and search. Like, it just needs to be mobilely responsive. People don't want to download an app that they're going to use once a year.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think that there are some agencies that are considering rolling these types of apps out right now. I think Social Security, but the VA mobile app, I still use, but not maybe.
Well,
not
I think there's a case for the VA mobile app because you would use it frequently, right? And it's like you need to be logged in and authenticated for everything you're going to do, and like you're managing prescriptions and things like that. High transaction,
yeah,
like that one you get a lot of use out of, so that makes sense.
But I do like the digital experiences that we have created. Like, I was checking myssa.gov the other day just because I was like hearing about it in the news, and I was like, oh well, all my quarters that I've paid into in one PDF, like show what when I turn 62 or 67 or 70, like this is like it's incredible.
Yeah, it's actually really cool.
Yeah, and it has the Medicare side and the other tax benefit. I forget what specifically, but if you haven't logged in, if you've never tried myssa.gov, please go on.
Do it.
Login.gov.
Make sure that and your IRS are always fresh and you know the password.
Yes, that's important. These are two very important, right? So as much as we don't want to pay taxes, but it's pretty critical. Okay, so then what's one technology investment that's underrated today?
Design. Like the scoping for what you need to put. I remember the farm loans process, we were like, oh, we should digitize it. That was sort of the inclination because it was all paper-based. And we actually got into it doing user research with farmers. We found that they actually really valued coming in person to meet with the county officer. They learned a lot. It was a great way for them to connect. Obviously if you're living in a rural place and you're not close to your neighbors, like coming in and having that kind of connection and sense of community and learning what's going on is really important. And we found that the farm loans process was 162 different technical systems, and it was a 13 series of 13 forms. If we had paid to digitize that, we would have wasted so much money. And so we actually found that if you actually get the most frustrating thing is when people went through that process and then got denied because they applied for the wrong loan.
Oh, God.
Not because they were ineligible. And so if we just helped at the front end, we could do some very easy sort of quick reference, figure out which loan is right for you. Then they could get on the track. And then that bought us the time to do the deep work of how could we streamline the process, how could we reduce the information on the forms, how could we combine forms, and then digitize that. And that all came from upfront design work.
So the navigation, the enrollment navigation process, start that digital first and then determine which path to go down, and then
Yeah, and then so I think it's the measure twice, cut once, right? I think in technology sometimes we just go straight to in government at least, we go straight to the big build or the big project, and less of the what if we did classic agile development, but also we just don't. It feels so counterintuitive, I think, in government to spend money up front to get it right.
True.
Yeah.
Digital eligibility does make sense though, to route you the right direction, because then you might just give up if you get denied, right?
Right.
Which happens all the time for government benefits. So.
Yeah. And because you didn't fill out the information correctly, or it's not because you actually aren't ineligible.
How many farm loans are processed a year?
It's a great question. I knew that at one time. I do not know now.
It's probably more than you would think, I would imagine.
Yeah, right? I know people don't, USDA is near and dear to my heart as an Ohioan too, but there's over 2,000 county offices across the country. That's a huge footprint and front door to the government.
Yeah, probably within a few hours drive of just about everybody.
Yeah. Totally.
Still a few hours drive, which is in itself an administrative burden. But
Yes.
if you live in a rural area, where then that may seem like nothing. So.
But that was something that farmers told us, is they value their time, and if they take off a day from farming to go into an office, they want it to be worthwhile.
Yeah.
They value it, but they want it to be worthwhile.
ROI, like a loan, right? To
Totally.
continue operations. So.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's the biggest misconception about government customer experience?
That it's soft and fluffy.
Okay.
Yeah. The number of times that people are like, well, that's like nice and cute. And you're like, you don't even know. This is table stakes.
Yeah.
We don't get this right, nothing else matters.
Well, and you can see real results once you do get it right. I
Yeah.
mean, several agencies, many agencies, right? And state
Yeah.
agencies as well. It really impacts.
Yeah, I think people today feel like their government is not listening to them or not hearing what their problem is and giving them their like policy medicine. And I think it's like, and then, people are like, how did we get here? And so I think it's like, we're all good. Everyone's due for a good dose of humility of like, what do people actually want and what would be responsive to their needs? And that is what customer experience approaches can help you do.
Shift from agency design, or I've been in this job for 20 plus years. I know what's best for citizens, and shift to citizen design, right? Yeah, absolutely. Like, what matters most to them, and what pain points can we solve for?
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
do they actually want you to spend time, money, resources?
Yeah. Well, I would agree with definitely a big misconception is that was the first, objection we got, as I mentioned, from our service branch and Defense Department colleagues, and then I think turned them into detractors immediately into promoters after one or two workshops. So it's really incredible. Okay, last one. What does great digital government look like in 2030?
Ooh, in 2030, that's a good anchor because you can go a little bit. I think it's like you don't have to feel like you're interacting with government, but you know that it's there and it works, So it's like, it's tax time. Oh, everything's like ready for me. I can just like click submit and then I get what I need and I've met my requirement, and
that would be cool.
It's like a dependable friend. It's there, but you don't have to like ask for anything. It doesn't annoy you if you don't want it.
Your government assistant is here to help make your life easier, not make it harder, right?
It's there when you need it, and it works when you need it too.
We may have just created a new app.
Yeah.
No, please God, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Exactly.
At least a new, But that's what we should aspire to. I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Amira, thank you so much for joining this new adventure that we're on. Any final thoughts you wanted to share about CX in the public sector, federal, state, local, international, before we close it up?
Just get out there, I guess, I think no one is too important or too busy to spend time experiencing government. And so whether you are at any level of government, if you are running for office, if you are a senior civil servant, if you are a state, local, if you're at a nonprofit that's like advocating for things, like go do the thing. Try and fill out the form, call the call center, sit in an office and watch people.
Secret shop it.
Secret shop it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one at any level is too senior to do that. Or too busy. That's the most valuable half hour you'll spend a month.
Well, that would be an interesting exercise for every department level secretary or administrator to go and fill out the most painful form that they have, or maybe even the best one that they have, but still find ways to improve it. So
we tried to get that in the executive order, a mandate that every secretary, deputy secretary had to do at least whatever, and then it was like, oh, it's a little condescending, but I don't know. I think one day we could make it part of the job description. Yeah, or part of your, their first week on the job, they have to report back to executive office of the president, like how their experience was. Yeah. So, interesting. What form did you fill out this month? Yeah. Did you how's your journey been in your own department? So. Yeah. Totally. Cool. Yeah. Well, Amira, thank you so much again. Thank you. Thanks for your service on many fronts. No, thank you for your service, and may we continue to endeavor upon it. So thanks again. Yeah. All right.